you smell what the rock is cooking?
Welcome to another installment of Mr. Shuck's Flipped ELA. To begin today, I want to take a moment to review our flipped lesson strategies. Remember that you can stop the video at any time. You should have a writing utensil and your notebook with you in order to take detailed notes. While you are taking notes, make sure that you are listening to the video and not just reading what you see on the slides. Remember that you can watch the video as many times as you need to, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow my page. Today, we are going to continue our poetry unit by talking about Walt Whitman, who lived in 1819 and died in 1892. Walt Whitman is considered by many to be America's first great poet. You can see two pictures here of Walt Whitman. The picture on the left is a younger image, and the picture on the right would be an image of Walt Whitman in his later life. We'll begin by talking about his life and influences. Walt Whitman was born in Long Island, New York in 1819. As a child, he developed a very strong love of nature. He enjoyed being outside and getting fully involved with nature. He was always strong academically in his English and writing classes, and he actually left school early in order to pursue a career as a printer. As he got older, he worked a variety of different jobs, all related to English and writing in some sense. He worked as a printer, an editor, a teacher, an essayist, and he is most commonly known as a poet. Walt Whitman was able to witness the rapid growth and expansion of New York City. During the early 1800s, there was a major population boom in New York City, and a lot of it had to do with immigration and immigrants arriving at Ellis Island, which is in New York. Ellis Island is the place where many European immigrants first arrived to the United States and where they were processed and documented as legal citizens of the United States. Many of these citizens, once they left Ellis Island, decided to stay in New York City, where they were able to help with the development and expansion of the city, or the actual building of New York City itself. The Civil War was also a major influence in Walt Whitman on his writing. If you remember your history classes, the Civil War dates from 1861 through 1865. During this time period, Walt Whitman volunteered as a nurse, where he cared for both wounded Union and Confederate soldiers. He had a great respect and admiration for President Abraham Lincoln. This can be easily seen in two of Walt Whitman's most well-known poems about Abraham Lincoln, "O Captain, My Captain," and "When the Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed." Both of these poems revolve around Abraham Lincoln and the death of this great United States president. Walt Whitman, along with many great writers, had a sense of arrogance about him. Arrogance is an exaggerated sense of one's own importance. People who are arrogant tend to think very highly of themselves. They tend to have a big ego and get kind of conceited and cocky at times. Walt Whitman was so arrogant that in his later life he was tracked down by a publisher as he was leaving a New York City hotel. The publisher saw this person and was wondering if it was actually Walt Whitman, so he approached him and asked him the question, "Are you Walt Whitman?" In response, Walt Whitman said, "I am Walt Whitman, and if you'll lend me $1, you will be helping immortality to stumble on." So in a sense, Whitman believed that his writing was going to last forever, and that his writing would always be relevant. So if we think about his writing as something that is going to last forever and always be relevant, we've got two more questions to think about. Is he right? Is he immortal? Will his writing always be relevant? As we work our way through some of Whitman's poems, we'll start to answer some of these questions. Walt Whitman had a very unique poetic style. He was the first poet to use free verse extensively. And if you remember back to your definitions, free verse is a style of poetry where we don't have a set rhythm or rhyme scheme or format. When Walt Whitman started to write poetry using free verse, people did not like it at first. It was very different, it was very new. So in 1855, when Whitman tried to get his first collection of poems published, entitled Leaves of Grass, he actually had to pay out of his own pocket to have these poems published. He traveled around to various different publishers throughout New York, and no one wanted to purchase this collection of poems in order to publish it. So Whitman paid for the publication of this collection of poems, probably his most well-known work, out of his own pocket. This was because this style of poetry, this free verse style, was very new and very unique. It was very different from any other poetry up until this point. Whitman believed that poems should be simple and natural, and that poets should forget about rhythm, rhyme, meter, and form. Some common themes that we find in Whitman's poetry include, but are not limited to, nature, life and death, pain and suffering, the idea of the self, which is basically wondering about one's own self, mankind in general, and common everyday working people. As we move forward with our study of poetry, we will start with our first of Walt Whitman's poems entitled I Sit and Look Out.